In today's video, guys, we're gonna have a look at all of the new Christmas champions that will be added in the next update, together with the Fusion champion. Now, we're gonna have some very interesting champions, and we actually even have a hint at what champion will get a buff next year for Christmas. Assuming that it will happen in the exact same way it happened this year with Sir Nicholas, right? If you guys remember, last year the Christmas Fusion was Lady Noel. She introduced a new partnership mechanic with Sir Nicholas, but Sir Nicholas had pretty much nothing in his kit to say, hey, I'm Lady Noel's partner, right? And we have another similar situation with one of the new champions. Basically, we are getting a new dwarf, and the new dwarf is called Hili the Rime-called. Now, she has a lot of interactions with Tormin the Cold. So basically, everything in her kit has to do with Tormin the Cold, activating him to do tons of different things. Now, one thing to keep in mind with Tormin the Cold, he has absolutely no interactions with no characters, which means that most likely in the future, they will repeat the same thing they've done with Sir Nicholas and buff Tormin the Cold to have a passive interaction with the new champion. But assuming that it took them 1 year to do it for Sir Nicholas, I would say that it's safe to assume that Tormin the Cold will get a buff in 1 year from now. But either way, let's quickly talk about the new champions. And since we are in this faction, let's start with Hili the Rime-called. She does look pretty awesome. I love the face design, the icy crystals and stuff. She is a support legendary, a force affinity champion. Pretty good base stats. With the A1 skill, we have Frost Flame Torch. Attacks an enemy twice. Each hit has a chance of placing a defense down. If Tormin the Cold is on the same team, has a chance of instantly activate his Rime Fire skill. Now, I do not remember his skills by the name, and that is the A1. Okay, so his Rime Fire skill is the A1, which will be an AoE with a chance to freeze. Really interesting. With her A2, Embittering Cold on a 3-turn cooldown fully booked, removes all buffs from all enemies and places a freeze debuff on all enemies for 1 turn. If Tormin the Cold is on the same team, instantly activates his Blizzard Rage skill, and this skill's cooldown cannot be decreased or reset. The Blizzard Rage, I think, is the AoE on Tormin, right? Yes, which has a chance to put block buffs, heal reduction, and freeze, and she's going to remove all of the buffs from all enemies, and he will have a chance to provoke too. That's actually pretty nice. So block buffs, heal reduction if they are under freeze, and then a chance to provoke if they are not under freeze. Sounds like a pretty solid interaction for the two of them, especially for Faction Wars hard mode. Then the A3 skill, Ward of the Glacier, revives all that allies with 50% HP and 30% turn meter, places a block damage buff on all allies for 1 turn and a 30% increased speed buff on all allies for 2 turns. Will place those buffs even if no allies were revived. If no allies were revived by this skill, also fills the turn meter of all allies by 25%. And you cannot decrease the cooldown of this skill or reset it. This will be on a 4-turn cooldown. I'm not sure why they introduced this. You cannot decrease it or reset it for whatever reason. Maybe it's a bit too powerful, but we have tons of different revivers that do similar things. So, that's one of them, right? I think she seems like a pretty nice champion. I would love to get her on my main account because I have no good solid revivers for Faction Wars hard mode, and I think she would be very helpful in there. Then you have the passive, Divine Mission. Whenever an enemy receives a freeze debuff, this champion steals 1 random buff from them, places an HP burn debuff on them for 2 turns, and decreases their turn meter by 10. Crazy good interaction with Tormin, because if you have freeze and HP burn, Tormin just goes absolutely bananas. Now, if Tormin is on the same team, fills the turn meter by an amount equal to the enemy's turn meter decreased by this skill. If there are multiple champions on the team with this skill, blah, 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 only one will activate. You guys know the drill with that one. I think they will have a very nice interaction. Now, they won't be crazy powerful in high-end PvP, but they can be decent in PvP as well. And you have a speed aura for all battles, 19%. Hell yeah, I would love myself a Hili to pair her with my Tormin. I think that can be really, really cool. Now, based on these guys, based on this, I am somewhere at around 99% sure that this champion will be guaranteed during Christmas. Okay? Out of the new champions, I think she's the one that makes the most sense to be a guaranteed. She pairs with an existing champion that was given to us in a Titan event before he was a fusion. Why not make this a guaranteed? People will go for her, right? Just because of that interaction on its own. So I think it's safe to say that this will be the guaranteed legendary that we're going to have for Christmas. Last year we had Bells. If I remember correctly, 2 years ago, I can't really remember what we had, but we had another guaranteed. So I think she might be the one this time around. Then we have a new epic. We have Maddak, which most likely is going to be the epic use for the classic fusion. He's an attack-based champion. Magic affinity, attacks an enemy, has a chance of transferring a random debuff from the champion to the target. An AoE attack that has a chance of removing a random buff from all enemies and has a chance of stealing 2 random buffs instead if the target is under block buffs or block active skills. Wait. Has a chance of stealing 2 random buffs instead if the target is under a block buffs. I mean, if they will be under a block buff, most likely they won't be getting any buffs, right? What am I missing here? Then you have the A3 Beast Faller. Faller. Attacks an enemy 3 times. The first hit has a chance to place a block buffs. The second has a chance to put a block active skills. And the third one has a chance to apply a debuff spread, taking 1 random debuff to the target and placing it on all enemies. And this champion deals 15% more damage to enemies whose accuracy is less than these champions. It doesn't seem like it's anything too special in particular, but he could potentially be helpful in some cases. And he has an attack aura. But on the Shadowkin, we have the new fusion. Yukimasa, Demon of Ice. We already know exactly what this champion does. Stay tuned because I will be posting a showcase today just to show you guys how the champion performs. But you can have a look at the total stats. Good speed, very good attack, a bit low on the defense. And the HP is kind of like average, nothing too special for an attack-based champion. Now, considering that he's meant to be a reviver as well, I wish he would be a bit tankier. Hopefully, his damage is gonna be good. Then, moving on to the Banner Lords, we have a new Void Legendary, which most likely won't be the guaranteed one, right? So we have Cecilia the Red Hope, a defense-based champion. She does look pretty awesome. We got a lot of Banner Lords recently, right? With the Mythical and all that. Pretty good stats. A defense-based champion. With A1, attacks an enemy, heals all allies by 10% of their max HP. With A2, attacks all enemies twice. The damage dealt by the skill increases by 5% for each ally above 50% HP. Interesting mechanic, and she deals damage based on defense and enemy max HP. And will place a perfect veil buff on all allies except this champion for 2 turns. And this is on a 3-turn cooldown. Actually, really good with that veil. I'm curious if she actually deals a bit of damage, because she does have the stats of a nuker rather than a support, right? We have crit damage, 63%, good defense, good speed, enemy max HP damage. Then you have the A3. Attacks all enemies before attacking, places an increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns. So it's nice that she's gonna self-buff. Places a strengthen buff and a counter-attack buff on all allies for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. Damage based on defense. Actually, a really nice kit. Strengthen, increased defense, counter-attack on everybody. I think that's nice. And you have the passive. You have the Spirit of Giving on a 4-turn cooldown fully booked. The active effect places a revive on that buff for 1 turn on an ally when that ally's HP falls below 50%. If there are multiple champions, only one will activate. So you have a revive on that on a 4-turn cooldown. Then the passive effect, at the start of this champion's turn, removes one random debuff from a random ally and fills their turn meter by 10%. Actually, pretty good passive. It's not the most busted one. I think she's a good Void Legendary champion. Now, it will depend if her damage is going to be somewhere decent, at least on the enemy max HP one. But overall, she seems pretty interesting. And seems like she might have some potential. Plus, you have a defense aura in all battles. She's not kind of like, oh my god, the new Void Legendary is absolutely OP, going to change metas and all that. But it's nice to see that we are getting a good counter-attack champion with increased defense, strengthen, revive on that, the cleanse from the passive, and enemy max HP damage. And some healing with A1, right? And a perfect veil, not to forget that part. So a lot of things coming from her kit. Really, really solid champion. Then we have a rare champion somewhere as well. Let me just quickly find it, which is Silvain, an attack, Void Affinity, which will be used for the fusion. Attacks an enemy 3 times. Each critical hit will ignore 5% of the target's defense. Attacks all enemies. Has a chance of placing the smaller version of Weaken. And an increased attack and an increased crit rate on the champion. Plus grants an extra turn. Of course, the smaller version of the buffs. Nothing special in particular with the rare champion. And moving on to the mythical champion. A new dark elf. We have Arachoa. Something like that. I'm sure you guys are gonna correct me in the comments down below. She looks pretty cool. She's a Force Affinity Mythical Champion. Support form on the first one. Attack on the second form. She kind of like reminds me a bit of Nell. Right? Yeah, they look very, very similar in terms of design. At least the stance and the character model. Let's go on to the support form. 110 base speed, 20 accuracy, good survivability stats. With A1, Mesmeric Fangs attacks an enemy twice. Each hit decreases the target's turn meter by 5%. Each hit decreases the target's turn meter by an additional 5% if the target is under any debuffs placed by this champion. With the A2, Moon Spider Maw attacks all enemies on a 3-turn cooldown fully booked, decreases the turn meter of all enemies by 50%, decreases the turn meter of all enemies by 100% instead if this skill is used on an extra turn or instant turn. Pretty nice. You're gonna understand the extra turn mechanic in a second. Then it will place a True Fear debuff for 1 turn, places a True Fear debuff for 2 turns instead against enemies whose turn meter is fully decreased by this skill and bosses. Wait. Places a True Fear debuff for 2 turns instead against enemies whose turn meter is fully decreased by this skill and bosses. By this skill and bosses. How are the bosses going to decrease the turn meter of their own allies? Huh? I'm a bit lost by that part. I'm not sure what they mean with this part with and bosses. It doesn't really make sense to me at all right now. Maybe it's too early in the morning, but I don't get it. Then you have the A3. Dark Trance on a 4-turn cooldown fully booked. Removes all buffs from all enemies. Places a defense down and a block active skills debuff on all enemies for 2 turns. That's actually pretty interesting. And grants an extra turn if 8 or more debuffs were placed by this skill. So in PvE, as long as you're not getting resisted, you're guaranteed to get the extra turn and move into the A2, which will deplete 100% turn meter. Because you gain the extra turn, which is pretty interesting. I'm not sure how likely this is going to be in PvP. Either you need crazy high accuracy, which will kind of mess up with your damage. The first form is good, but is nothing crazy special to make you want to build her only for the first form. if you get what I mean, right? Then you have the passive. Spider Scuttle increases this champion's speed by 4 for each debuff placed by this champion, and by 2 for each debuff resisted when this champion attempts to place debuffs, stacking up to 100. That's actually pretty good. Only counts debuffs placed by this champion's skills. So gaining 100 speed on top of your normal speed is actually really nice. Let's move on to the Metamorph. You have an accuracy aura for all battles, 80 accuracy, and the attack form. Good stats, good survivability. The attack is decent, good speed. With A1, Astral Ravage attacks an enemy twice, fills this champion's turn meter by 5% for each critical hit. It will fill this champion's turn meter by an additional 5% for each critical hit if the target is under a block active skills debuff or a defense down. If this attack kills an enemy, grants an extra turn instead. Pretty nice with the A1, but of course, we need to see multipliers. With the A2, that rat spin on a 3-turn cooldown fully booked, it will deal damage based on attack and enemy max HP. Attacks one enemy 3 times, will always use this skill instead of the default skill when counterattacking. This skill cannot be blocked by block active skills debuffs. Pretty damn nice. Very nice actually that block active skills will not work versus, and when counterattacking using this skill is amazing. Will ignore shield and block damage buffs. Additionally, ignores unkillable buffs if the target is under a block active skills debuff or a defense down. And it will fill this champion's turn meter by 15% for each critical hit. Now, we've seen the first form. I'm thinking that maybe what they've meant with that thing right here is that she can land through fear on bosses for 2 turns. I think that's what they mean, nothing to do with the turn meter. I think so. If that's the case, having through fear, defense down, block active skills on one form, right? And then having to move into the second form and having the ability to do enemy max HP damage, I think it can be very, very good versus the Chimera. Okay, I think this can be very good in there. But we're gonna have to test her and see. Then you have the A3 skill. Gossamer Execution. Attacks one enemy 4 times. Each hit will ignore 15% of the target's defense. Each hit will ignore 30% instead if the target is under a block active skills debuff or a defense down debuff. And they do not need to be placed by this champion. Fills this champion's turn meter by 20% for each critical hit. Then places a perfect veil buff on the champion for 2 turns. This can be very helpful once again with Chimera Trials. So it seems like she might be ticking a lot of boxes for the Chimera. She does have a lot of multi-hits in the skill, which means that if she is good for PvP, she's here to deal with a new Mercurial set, right? And then you have the passive. Great Web Mistress. This champion is immune to crowd control debuffs while under a veil or a perfect veil. Once again, really good for the Chimera. Of course, Polymorph is still a thing. She's not immune to it. This champion also cannot receive critical hits while under a veil or a perfect veil. That's really, really good because if they're not going to be able to crit on you, you might actually just stay alive and get the job done. She seems like a pretty interesting mythical champion. I will have, of course, I will need to test her in order to see if he's something that I want to add to my wish list, if I want to get a mythical champion or not. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. But she does look pretty damn amazing. I actually like the design. I'm digging it. That was all for the new Christmas champions, guys. We have 5 new champions, including the Fusion with the Rare and the Epic. I am very positive that if they are doing a guaranteed this time around, most likely it's going to be Hili the Rime-called. Which is fine, because she's a good reviver for the Dwarf faction. Something that I actually need on my account, especially considering that I do not have Sina Umberheart. As usual, appreciate every single one of you guys watching, and make sure you guys stay tuned for the Fusion Showcase. I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.